If you get your perspective right and you get the first things put first, all of the other issues will sort of naturally fall into place and figure themselves out. And so this principle shows up in tons of different areas. It shows up all over the place if you look for it. For instance, the word planet comes from an ancient Greek word meaning wanderer, or like to wander. And basically the idea is, back then everybody thought that the Earth was stationary and everything else was rotating around the Earth. So the movements of the sun and the moon and the distant stars all made sense, because from that perspective, they were all moving cyclically. They were all moving cyclically and made sense. The planets, on the other hand, because the Earth is rotating around the sun faster than the outside planets and slower than the inside planets, their movements seem to be erratic. They would be moving faster or slower, they'd be ahead of us or behind us. The kind of ancient astronomers couldn't understand what was going on. These planets seemed chaotic, their patterns seemed weird, they seemed to be wandering. It wasn't until we got our perspective right, we understood that it's actually a heliocentric, a sun-centered model of the solar system, meaning everything's moving around the sun, but actually these movements made sense. There was an order we were not able to perceive because our perspective was out of line. This principle of alignment can show up physiologically. Like when I was 16, I broke one of my toes in a couple places, I shattered it, and it messed up the way my foot moved. It messed up my stride, my ankle turned to compensate it. What seemed like 5 or 6 different problems was really one thing that was out of line. When I was really little, I would rush through math tests, I'd get all nervous, and I would make a lot of careless mistakes. And so initially I would think, oh man, I'm struggling with this kind of problem and this thing, when really there was one issue, which is that I was going too fast, and it was having an effect in a variety of different areas, kind of like a interconnected weed system, right? And it's popping up in all these different areas, and you think, man, I got tons of different problems or tons of different things I need to pay attention to, when really there's an initial alignment or misalignment that needs to be adjusted and corrected, which will affect everything downstream. Anybody that spends a fair bit of time in the gym, you're going to understand this. You may think you have issues with tons of different lifts and tons of different kinds of movements, when usually it's just get your posture right. Like, if you can get your posture right, brace your core, that will have a downstream impact, a downstream positive impact on basically every other movement you do. This can show up a lot in our relationships. I was talking to a family member, obviously I'm not going to say who it was, maybe 10 years ago, and they're going over all the different ways that they get into arguments with other people, all the different kinds of things they're trying to remember. Like, oh, I have to remember to not talk, and I have to remember to listen, and I have to remember to, try to figure out what they're saying, and I have to try to get them to agree with me. And it was this laundry list of issues they were trying to deal with. And after a while I thought, or you could just accept that you don't know everything, and then naturally, if you accept that you don't know everything, it will create some space, and then in that space you will want to find out what the other person has to say, which will lead to better listening, which will naturally create better, more organic questions, higher quality questions, better quality of conversation. And interestingly enough, if you are more open to what the other person has to say, they'll be more open to what you have to say, and that will actually help you be more persuasive rather than trying to argue and fight all the time. This can show up in martial arts, where maybe you're looking at 50 different techniques and you're trying to memorize all these different techniques and sort of use the front of your mind to hold on to them, when really, if you understand the basic principles behind a couple of the movements, and then you apply good principles to simple techniques, it's much easier, it's much more simple, and you'll get a much higher leverage and return on your output. So it took me way longer than it probably should have to figure that out, but if you're going into any new pursuit, if you're going into any new endeavor, maybe you're wanting to improve something, I know that for me, oftentimes when you're new in something, it can feel really overwhelming because you're trying to absorb and solve problems, what looks like a variety of different things, tons of different things to memorize, when really, if you take a step back, have that sort of systematic approach to it, you'll realize, oh, there's maybe 1 or 2 perspective shifts or 1 or 2 principles that I need to apply, or just a simple idea, a simple adjustment I need to make at the outset, which will naturally create improvements and mitigate all the issues downstream.